Welcome to my channel. My name is Antonio Yerbasoni. I'm a Peruvian composer and university professor, and this is the 5th video in my series on orchestration, which aims to introduce you to some key aspects of this wonderful art. In this video, I'll briefly explain some fundamental concepts about the role of percussion in orchestral music. One of the roles least understood by my orchestration students is that of percussion. They rarely have a clue what to do with it and tend to misuse it. A key aspect is style. If you're orchestrating a piano piece from the 18th century, overusing percussion is a mistake, not because its constant use is incorrect, but because it's not appropriate for the music of that period. If, on the other hand, you are orchestrating something more modern, you can go as far as Limantour did in his version of La Noche de los Mayas by Mexican composer Silvestre Revueltas, and ask for 12 percussionists who play almost all the time. In his book Principles of Orchestration, Rimsky-Korsakov says the following: as regards expression, the strings come first, and the expressive capacity of the other groups diminishes, color being the only attribute of the last group of percussion instruments. As much as I respect Rimsky-Korsakov, I think he was wrong. There are many different roles that percussion instruments can fulfill, apart from adding color, and, in fact, he used them himself in his works. This one is obvious. Tuned percussion instruments can be used to play an important melody on their own, or they can provide harmonic support to other instruments. A much-cited example of an important melody on a percussion instrument is Mozart's glockenspiel part in the Magic Flute. The vibraphone part of Roy Harris' Third Symphony has moments in which the instrument plays 4-note chords to reinforce the harmony of the strings. I can't show the music here for copyright reasons, but you can find recordings of this symphony on YouTube. Unpitched percussion can also have an independent part, that is, it can have a rhythm that doesn't coincide with that of any instrument of the other three families, as in the case of a typical military march rhythm. The most frequently cited case is surely Ravel's Bolero. But there are also even more extreme examples, such as the first movement of Carl Nielsen's Fifth Symphony, in which a snare drum plays rhythms at a different tempo than the orchestra. In symphonic works influenced by popular music, such as Bernstein's Symphonic Suite from West Side Story or Lloyd Webber's Phantom of the Opera, a drum kit is used to provide a rhythmic bass, just like in popular songs. As Rimsky-Korsakov pointed out, one of the most common roles for percussion is indeed the simple addition of color to an orchestral passage. Unlike strings, woodwinds, and brass, which can be mixed to some degree with each other, percussion instruments almost always feel separate, not so much because of their timbre, but because their involvement is usually brief. Notes cannot be sustained and die quickly. Of course, besides adding color, percussion will also tend to reinforce, so both roles are always very present, but in some cases one will be more important than the other. In this example, the glockenspiel helps outline the melody. It's like drawing a thin black line on an image. Aside from timpani, the most common tuned percussion instruments in the modern orchestra are the xylophone, marimba, glockenspiel, vibraphone, tubular bells, and crotales. As I just said, the percussion tends to stay separate, so care should be taken when using them, as they can easily end up in the foreground, unless this is what the orchestrator wants. Of the instruments mentioned, only the marimba manages to stay in the background, although this depends on issues such as register and dynamics. In this excerpt, for example, the marimba is barely heard, but the xylophone is very noticeable. Therefore, the percussion is best used when one wishes to highlight an element in the music. In general, the percussion is the section with the most precise attack of the entire orchestra. A multi-instrument hit, for example, can dramatically improve the attack at an important point. In tonal music, timpani are frequently used to reinforce the bass, especially in cadences. Changing the pitch too quickly in the timpani can be awkward, so when the bass has a note that doesn't match the pitch of any drum, another note from the harmony can be used as well. It's even possible to use the timpani if none of them is tuned to a note present in the harmony. Just listen to this example by Rimsky-Korsakov and you'll see what I mean. Percussion is especially good for reinforcing crescendos. There are countless examples of percussion rolls that help intensify the crescendo towards a climatic moment. Percussion is also very effective to establish a pedal, be it harmonic or just pure noise. The typical case of the harmonic pedal obviously occurs on timpani, but it can also be achieved with other tuned percussion instruments, such as the xylophone. The noise pedal, of course, is related to the use of unpitched percussion. This type of pedal is useful when the music doesn't have a note that can serve that purpose, or when the orchestrator feels that a pedal is appropriate despite not being present in the original work. In the example already given above, from Rimsky-Korsakov's Sherazade, the triangle and tambourine play a noise pedal in the high and middle registers respectively. As with color and reinforcement, pedal and noise, which I'll discuss in a moment, are closely related. They are often present simultaneously, although there are also examples that lean more towards one case than the other. By noise I mean the use of percussion to saturate a certain register with noise. Of course, this can occur as a consequence of a pedal, but this case is considered separately because a pedal doesn't always produce this effect. A typical example is the use of a triangle tremolo to saturate the high register, a very common feature in music from the Romantic period that today feels a bit cheesy. Stravinsky's Firebird begins with cellos and double basses accompanied by a bass drum roll that adds noise in the low register. Something similar occurs at the end of the first part of The Rite of Spring, where a tam-tam roll completely saturates the middle register. Listen to this example from Ravel's orchestration of Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition. The cymbal roll is obviously not present in the original work, but Ravel was aware of the fact that the orchestra would produce too clean a result compared to the piano version, which is normally played with a sustain pedal. The use of percussion instruments to accentuate the beat is a rare case in symphonic music prior to modernism. It began to appear more and more frequently since the early 20th century, especially in the works of Russian composers such as Stravinsky and Prokofiev, and later in those of Latin American composers such as Revueltas and Ginastera. In North America, minimalism and post-minimalism have a great tendency to use percussion instruments to constantly accentuate the beat. An example of this occurs in John Adams' Short Ride on a Fast Machine. I can't show this example here for copyright reasons, but there are several recordings of this piece available on YouTube. Another example is the beginning of Lutosławski's Concerto for Orchestra. If you're orchestrating an old piece, overusing percussion is probably not appropriate, because percussion was sparingly used in the past. But if you're orchestrating something more modern, there's no limitation on the number of percussion instruments you can use. Tuned percussion instruments can be used to play an important melody or provide harmonic support for other instruments. On the other hand, unpitched percussion can have an independent rhythmic part. Percussion instruments can add color to an orchestral passage, but they will almost always feel separate because their sound dies quickly. In doing so, they'll also tend to provide reinforcement, and the result can be compared to drawing a thin black line on an image. Timpani are frequently used to reinforce the bass, especially in cadences, and although their notes normally coincide with those of the bass line, they can also be used if they play other notes of the harmony, or even if neither of them is tuned to a note present in the harmony. Percussion is also very effective in setting a pedal, be it harmonic or inharmonic. The former is useful if there's a pedal already established in the harmony. The second helps create a pedal when there's no common note in the harmony. Finally, percussion is also used to saturate a certain register with noise, such as the typical triangle tremolo in many romantic works, or the bass drum roll at the beginning of Stravinsky's Firebird. Thank you for watching this video, and subscribe to be notified when I post a new one. I give private lessons online on orchestration. If you want to know more, click on the linked video or visit my website. The link is in the description below.